If you want to read more but need a few tips, this is the video for you. So 2 years ago, I made a video sharing 20 tips and ways to read more. I tend to be the person that can't stop myself from reading, and every year I try to read less and it never happens. And I'm not overly mad about that. I just really enjoy reading. It's how I relax. So I wanted to share some tips and tricks for those that want to read more. I'm not saying you have to read more. I'm not saying reading is a competition, but a lot of people do ask me how I can read so much with so much other stuff going on in life, and they ask for different tips and tricks. So I made a video with 20 ideas. That's a lot, maybe that's overwhelming. Today I'm gonna give you 5 tips that I think are probably the best 5. You can go back and watch my video with my 20 tips and tell me if these are really the best, but in my opinion, these are the 5 that make me read more, so I assume they will make the average person read more as well. I don't think that these 5 need to be in any particular order. I'm going to tell you the order that I wrote them down in, but I don't think any one of these are necessarily better than the others. But the first one is to always have a TBR, which stands for to be read. And this is just a pile, either a physical pile or a Kindle pile or a library pile, or just a list of books that you're excited to read. This was a bit of a struggle for me for a few years, to have a continual list of books that I wanted to read from. And then I came across BookTube and Bookstagram, and now my pile is shelves and carts and never-ending, overflowing Kindle and online shopping cart and wish list, and it's just never ending. And I think that can be overwhelming, but it can also be very good, because the next time that you go to pick up a book, you have so many to choose from. I know some people like to have like a list, let's say numbered 1 through 100, and they go through the list in the order that they have it written down. I am not that kind of reader. I am the kind of reader that likes to have a shelf of books and, for the most part, just pull off whatever I'm in the mood for. Figure out what works for you. I'm not going to judge you. You could also just head to the library, pick out a bunch of books that look good, have a stack on your nightstand, and the next time you finish a book or are ready to start a new one, just pick one off of that stack. You don't have to be going and spending money like I do. You can also ask some of your friends for book recommendations if BookTube and Bookstagram aren't giving you the recommendations you need. Although I will say, like, BookTube is a huge space. Find someone that has similar tastes to you. This might take a little bit if you haven't been reading for a while to figure out what your tastes even are, but then when you find a few people, your TBR will explode, and it will be a dangerous thing to have, because if it ever fell over on you, it would squish you. My second idea, something I always do, is to always have a book with you. And I think that this goes hand in hand with having a book on every kind of device in every format. So I generally always have, well, I do always have at least one physical book going. I usually have an ebook going, and I usually have an audiobook going. So if all of a sudden I've gone somewhere and I've forgotten to take my physical book, I can use my phone and the Kindle app or the Libby app or the Hoopla app and read an ebook. Or if I'm driving in the vehicle, I can listen to an audiobook. And if you are going places, bring your physical book. I almost always do this. Even if I don't actually have time to read, I have a little safety net in case I did, and I don't have to waste time. Number 3 is just to read what you want. So if you do want to be that TBR person that has a list from numbers 1 through 100 and you just read in that order, sure, that's fine. But if you want to pick up a book off your shelf randomly and just read it because that's what's interesting to you in the moment, I find if I want to read a book, I'm going to read it more quickly, and then I can read the next book more quickly. And if you can get snowballing, then all of a sudden you're cruising through books, and the harder thing is to stop than to try to start to read. Part of reading what you want is being okay with not finishing a book. Here on BookTube, it's called DNFing a book, do not finish. You have to, this can be hard. And I think there are times when it's okay to push through if you're not enjoying a book, but sometimes you need to be okay with just quitting it, because continuing with a book that you're not enjoying can put you in a reading slump. I find that a fine balance. Sometimes there are some books I want to push myself with, especially like a classic or a nonfiction, but if it is a like supposed to be just for fun book and I'm not enjoying it for some reason or another, I am generally okay with quitting it most of the time. Number 4 is to read in the little spaces. Now, as a mother of 4 that homeschools and has a lot of stuff going on, I am almost never guaranteed a large chunk of time. So I read in the little spaces, and this means I don't just read an entire chapter at a time. Sometimes I grab my book and I read a page or a paragraph or a sentence, and then I'm interrupted, which sometimes seems like, wow, one paragraph, you didn't get very far. But I got one paragraph farther than I was. So think about the times in your day, even if you're not constantly being interrupted, but are there times in your day where you have a little space of time that you could be reading during that time, whether it's having your physical book with you or your ebook or your audiobook. I have a slight addiction to a homemade dairy-free hot cocoa. It's featured here a lot in my vlogs, and when it's warming up in the microwave for like a minute and a half, I can often be found with a book in hand and reading like a page or two during that time. It's not a big chunk of space, but it gets me a little bit further in my book. You could pull out your phone when you're waiting in line, and instead of just scrolling on social media, you could be getting a little bit more into the story that you're currently reading. Or you could arrive early going for coffee. I always take a book with me, and I generally try to arrive early because I just like to be the kind of person that, you know, on time or early. And quite recently, I met a online friend, now in-person friend, at a coffee shop, and I messaged her when I got there and I said, oh, because I was like really early, I was like half an hour early. I'm like, oh, I came early, but don't worry, I brought a book. And then she messaged me back and was like, I'm here too. And she also had a book. Then you know you have an instant connection if they're also arriving with a book. So neither of us really got to read, but we had that like mutual connection right off the bat. And some people are notoriously late people. So even if you arrived right on time and they were late, if you have your book, there's a benefit to them being late. You're not just wasting time. So think about your day and like the little pockets while you're brushing your teeth, for instance. Where are there little pockets in your day where you could be reading? And audiobooks are great for this because you could be doing something but listening to a book. And the last thing, which kind of contradicts my whole read in the little spaces, but I think it's good to have both of them. Both read in the little spaces and my number 5, which is set aside a chunk of time for reading. So in the last few years, we have tried to make Sundays after we get back from church a bit of a Sabbath day. We do some family stuff, but we also have some alone time because there are a lot of introverts in our family. We all just need a little bit of alone time after socializing. And for me, this means a large chunk of my Sundays is my reading time. This doesn't have to look exactly the same for you. Maybe for you, it's the hour before bed, which if you did that 5 to 7 days of the week, you'd get 5 to 7 extra hours of reading in. Or maybe like between 2 and 4 p.m. is a good time for you, or early in the morning between 6 and 7. Whatever it is, try to like schedule a time in your week or in your day where you can have an hour, 2, 3, whatever works for you in your season, but a larger chunk of time. Because when you can sit and move as little as possible when reading, you're not getting that constant removal of yourself from the story. It takes a lot longer to get back into a story than if you're just sitting there and reading through. If I sit and read for an hour or two, I can get about 100 pages per hour. But if that is interrupted every 3 to 5 minutes, I'm gonna read a lot less. So if you can get yourself immersed, you can get a lot farther into a story. So my tip for this, if you're going for like a long stretch at one time, is get all your comfy cozy things you need. Make your hot cocoa, grab a blanket, put your phone in a different room and get yourself cozy. Try to get the kids distracted doing something and try to just sit and read with as little movement as possible during your little space. Kind of protect that reading space. So those are my 5 top tips, I think. The 5 that if you just do these 5, I think you can accelerate your reading. Like I said, it's not a competition. You don't have to read a certain number of books every year. It's not a numbers game to me, but if you want to read more, hopefully you can glean some information, some helpful tips from this. If you want more tips, I have 15 more in my video from 2 years ago, which I'll leave linked below. And if you guys have some tips, I would love it if you would leave it in the comments, because I love reading and I love this community to grow, and I love more people to love to read even more. So it's just like win, win, win. Thanks for hanging out with me today.